Hello, one and all, and welcome back to another episode of Cast Iron, the podcast all about metal. I am Lewis Clark, your host, and I am joined, as always, by my good friend and cohort, Alan Williamson. Hello, Alan.
All right.
How goes?
Oh, it is very cold in Australia right now.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, well, this wasn't what they told me whenever I moved from the UK, was that Australia could actually be cold, but it can, and it is, and it's dipped under 10 degrees, so we've got the aircon on and I'm wearing thermals. But that's okay, because we're warming ourselves up with some forged in the fires of hell, straight out of a dragon's mouth, power metal.
Yeah.
And this time we are listening to Blind Guardian, and the album is A Night at the Opera.
Okay, so
wasn't this an interesting one?
It was an interesting choice, actually. So this is a strange one.
Why did we pick this? Why did we pick this one?
Right. Okay. So I don't remember. I don't remember why. We picked this one. So I have some familiarity is the word I want to say with Blind Guardian. I've listened to more of their recent stuff. I own their most recent 3 records, which is off the top of my head, A Twist in the Myth, At the Edge of Time, and Beyond the Red Mirror. So really like those records, 2 more than the others. But I often hear about A Night at the Opera being kind of the Blind Guardian record. It's often, among fans, it seems to be talked about as kind of like the magnum opus. I don't know whether I agree with that, but it was one of those records.
That, won't we?
Yeah, it was one of those records I hadn't got to. I'd heard so much good stuff about, and it felt like good sort of approximation of what this band's about. And I think that is the case to a certain degree, but it is different as well. So it wasn't what I was expecting from it.
So I am not super across Blind Guardian.
Right.
But there was definitely a point, now, sort of cast your mind back to about 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
I am just starting to get into metal. I have Kazaa Light, of course. You don't want the full Kazaa with all the advertising. And basically you just had potluck. So if you found a band you'd had a dip, and then you'd get your illegal MP3s.
Yep.
And the first Blind Guardian song I listened to was a track on this album, which is Punishment Divine.
Okay.
And I had definitely heard another one of the songs, Precious Jerusalem, on this. I listened to another couple of tracks like Nightfall, which I think is off the Middle Earth album.
Yeah.
And that's about it. I liked a couple of tracks, and I probably burned them to one of my dodgy homemade mix CDs. This was the style at the time. Yep. But I never really dipped that much into the back catalogue, and power metal is something that, it's not that I don't like it. I just don't think I'm particularly confident in it. So in the past couple of weeks since we recorded the last episode, I've been frantically trying to cut across a couple of Blind Guardian bits to understand a bit more about the band. I'll actually listen to the new album by Demons and Wizards.
I've actually got the first Demons and Wizards album in the post at the moment, because I've never listened to them, and I hear very, very good things, and I've heard lots of good stuff about the new one. So I thought, better start from the beginning. So
I've listened to the new one, and I would say it is pretty fucking good.
Good stuff.
I would describe it as a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's not one of my further listening recommendations, so I can get out of the way. It's a lot of fun. So power metal we've covered before. We covered Halloween's The Keeper of the Seven Keys, parts 1 and 2, which was a lot of fun. And I think an album, I think we both really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I enjoyed part 2 more than I did part 1, but I was definitely I had a good time with that record.
So we won't be doing any power metal again for a while. But Blind Guardian was so I think Halloween are Swedish, but Blind Guardian are one of the big German metal bands.
They
of the
are
80s,
indeed.
And I think to some extent they were influenced by Halloween. So you had a little bit, and a lot of these bands came out of the American thrash scene. So it was off the back of, you got a mishmash. I describe it as a mishmash of your thrashy bits, like your Metallicas and your Megadeths and your Testaments.
Yep.
And then you've also got a bit of new wave of British heavy metal in there. So there's quite a lot of Iron Maiden and Judas Priest coming through in this.
Yep.
It's like we're at a wine tasting.
Yeah.
You'll get the thrash, the sharpness of the thrash in your palate, and as you let it absorb, you'll taste the Maiden tannins in the back.
Absolutely.
And I think as we go through this, we'll touch on which bits remind me of which other bands. But power metal is generally, it's quite fast. I mean, this is where Blind Guardian thought about speed metal, I'm not familiar with that genre, but a lot of metal's fast.
The big one there definitely would be a German band also called Accept, who also have dabbled in speed metal as well, but much more traditional heavy metal, I suppose, in that regard as well. But yeah, I definitely would have assumed that Accept are quite a big influence on Blind Guardian. They've been around for absolutely God knows how long now.
And they had one out quite recently. What was it? I forget what it's called, but there's an album with it's a red-coloured album with a big bull on the front. It's good.
Okay, fair enough. Blind Rage, I think, is the name of the record that you're thinking of.
Yeah, I remember that. I listened to that and that was fun. But power metal, it's fast, it's melodic, and it's very, very cheesy. Now, I pissed off someone in Reddit the other day because I was interested in the band Fate's Warning.
Okay.
And I was on the Reddit prog metal subreddit, and I said, I'm in the mood for some really cheesy prog metal. Yeah. And it was because I had been listening to Blind Guardian. I was like, I could really go for, a bit of classic Dream Theater or Queensryche or something like that. Yeah. And then I asked about Fate's Warning, and somebody took it very personally. I described it as cheesy, and I was like, I mean that as a compliment. I like the cheese. I don't mind a little bit of cringe, but this is seriously cheesy.
Absolutely.
To my mind, I think power metal attracts a certain kind of fan. They probably have extremely long beards. They're probably wearing a Blind Guardian t-shirt. And there was one time we went to this pub in Southampton called The Hobbit, and it had Lord of the Rings themed cocktails. And I have no doubt that a lot of people who wear Blind Guardian t-shirts go to that. Not to cast aspersions on them. They're all very nice, but there's definitely a certain kind of style that comes with this kind of music.
No, agreed completely. If we want to go a little bit, just give it the broad paintbrush, power metal defined by Wikipedia is a subgenre of heavy metal combining characteristics of traditional heavy metal and speed metal, often with symphonic context. Generally, power metal is characterized by a faster, lighter, and more uplifting sound, in contrast to the heaviness and dissonance prevalent, for example, in extreme metal. I would also say that power metal is often quite conceptual, and they do like to draw from fantasy themes and stuff like that quite an awful lot as well.
Yep, a lot of Lord of the Rings type stuff.
Yeah, Blind Guardian are actually pretty. They've done that before as well. The album previous to this one is called Nightfall in Middle Earth, so you can imagine what that involves.
And the longest track in this, and then there was Silence is based in the Iliad. So
there we go.
There's a lot going on here. But I think that's definitely fair. Yep.
One thing we should mention as well in regards to this record, it is called A Night at the Opera, which is obviously the same name as a Queen record, and Blind Guardian don't half like that sort of layered falsetto kind of vocal style that is often very similarly used by Queen themselves. So something to think about as well. I'm sure there's a heavy influence there as well.
We'll definitely get onto that because I have thoughts and opinions on the vocal layering of this album. Now, speed metal, because I too have been on Wikipedia, and they are saying that the prototypical speed metal song is something like Judas Priest's Exciter.
Oh, that makes sense.
You know that one?
Yep, that makes sense.
And I first heard that because there's a cover on it in the opening of Dead or Alive 2.
Yep.
But if you've heard Exciter by Judas Priest, that's a speed metal track. That's helping me. Hopefully that helps you too.
Absolutely. I think that ballparks it quite well. So, A Night at the Opera then is a 2002 release by Blind Guardian, quite late into their discography. I'd say
I find that astonishing that it sounds like it's a 2002 album because it sounds like something from the 80s.
Yeah, it's very much so. And I mean, the band were formed in the 80s as well. 3 of the 4 current members are pretty much from the original lineup as well, so pretty consistent lineup of Hansi Kirsch as lead vocalist and bassist in the early days, Andre Olbrich as lead guitarist and backing vocalist, Marcus Siepan as rhythm guitar and backing vocals, and currently from 2005 onwards, so he wouldn't have featured on this record. Frederick Emk as drums and percussion. The drummer for this record was Thomas Storch, who famously left the band after this because he didn't like the progressive nature that they were going in, which is really bizarre because the next record they don't go progressive at all.
It is really interesting. It's really interesting that he left and wasn't happy with the direction, because without jumping straight to the end, after listening to the couple of albums before this, I can see where he's coming from.
Fair enough. Maybe we should have chose those, but never mind.
This is one of the things it would be really easy for us to just go, okay, what's this band? Blind Guardian, right? What's the top rated album? And then go and do that, and then go and do that, and then all that would happen is we'd listen to these songs, say that we think they're good, and then we get to the end of the podcast and we say that album was really good, and then we go on to the next album, and it would just be this hagiographic thing where we just we just end up talking about how great stuff is, and that's not very interesting. And the most interesting ones are whenever one person likes one thing and one person doesn't, like the Tool episode. And there's always a bit of follow-up in that because Jody Mullen, probably one of our 3 listeners, mentioned in Facebook that he said I was wrong about 10,000 Days by Tool, and it actually is good. And I haven't had a chance to listen to it again in depth, but I will do that. So thank you very much for the feedback.
And also some of the such tracks that you sent me in private over that, I did enjoy them as well. So and I think those came from...
So what did I send you? What did I send you?
The one in particular that I really enjoyed was I watched the music video. It had like a weird see-through man in it, and you could skeleton showing. What the hell was that?
That's all of them. Was it Vicarious or was it Parabola?
It was. What was the first one you said there?
Vicarious.
It was Vicarious, definitely Vicarious. Yeah, I did.
What a banger!
Quite enjoy that.
What a banger!
Quite a good song
good.
Indeed. So
did you get through Tempest?
I haven't.
All 15 minutes of it.
I haven't tried Tempest. No, tell a lie. I listened to that when it first came out because I think that was one of the pre-release singles, and I think that was another thing that led to my preconceptions of this band being a bit sort of noodly and wasting time, and I'd rather them just get to the point, sort of thing. So I wasn't too keen on the most recent stuff, but again, I think it's one of those bands that this isn't a great environment for them to really flourish, in that we're only giving them the sort of 1 play, maybe 2 in advance of the listener for the show, and I don't think that gives them enough time to really set in and for you to find your groove with them, unfortunately. I think if I gave Tool a little bit more of a repeated go, I think I probably would enjoy them, to be honest with you. But like I say, it's not the greatest way to do it.
Well, I was very surprised that somebody said to me, "You haven't listened to enough Tool," because I don't think anybody's going to ever say that, including my wife. So that was. It's always good to get unique feedback, but this is part of it. Is it's the same with the Blind Guardian stuff. If we've got any plaited beard Blind Guardian fans listening to this, or anybody from any band, we can only really do a surface level thing. And one of the things we're keen to do is try and do episodes more frequently.
Yeah,
and that means we don't want to rush it, right?
No, but absolutely. But it means that we jump
in and squeezing these things out. But
absolutely.
It's without. There's only so much we can do. There's only so much we can listen to.
Yeah.
And there's so many good metal albums coming out in the next few weeks.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What have I been listening to? There's Sirith Ungol had a new one. Catatonia had a new one. New Trivium is an outstanding album. We've got a new Lamb of God coming up. We've got 2 of my favourite bands, Caligula's Horse and Haken, have albums coming out in the next couple of weeks. The Streets of Rage 4 soundtrack, I didn't realise was on Apple Music.
There you go.
It's all happening. Anyway, we should probably get back to it and stop waffling. So
here we go.
So let's do it. So the first track is Precious Jerusalem.
Okay.
So what do you think of this? So this is pretty full on.
It is pretty full on. So I think preconceptions coming into this record and it being so highly regarded among my friends who really like this band, may have made this a little bit more of a disappointment, I think, because it's not like what I'm more familiar with Blind Guardian. I think they're more anthemic, and song structure is a little bit more traditional, whereas this record is quite progressive. And I liked Precious Jerusalem, don't get me wrong. I think it's got a really big anthemic chorus, really memorable, but I think it's a bit lacking in the instrumentation. I think it's very, like, the guitar work in particular is very fast-picked, high-pitched, sort of noodly, and not an awful lot of melody. There's not like riffs there that I can really sort of like hold on to.
Yeah.
But I can't deny that the chorus isn't really, really good, and there was a great solo around the 4-minute mark, which kept me involved. But I just feel like, verse-wise, it's very progressive, not an awful lot of melody and riffs going on during those verses, and yeah, I just couldn't quite get to grips with it, whereas at least with the chorus and that solo, there was something there to really sort of get into. How do you feel?
So I felt like... So I listened to this album, I stuck it on my watch and went for a run.
Yep.
I thought this was not bad for a running track.
Yeah.
But I thought, my God, this is full on.
Yeah,
I thought this was a bit long. I thought that after the first couple of minutes, I had heard enough.
Yeah,
and it wasn't really going to change much, and it was rather repetitive.
Yeah.
The chorus was okay the first time.
Yeah.
It was all right the second time, and then I don't know how many times it goes back. It seemed like about 4 or 5. So I thought it was quite repetitive. Again, not as much melody as I'd like. I mean, one of the things that we'll come back to is the super overlaid vocals and the choral effects.
Yep.
I think Hansi in general is a really excellent singer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like that is undermined by the end of Scroll stuff because it makes it sound like he can't sing.
I know what you mean. Yeah, absolutely.
And I thought especially in this track, the guitars are a bit low in the mix.
Yeah.
It's disappointing because whenever they come in that solo, it is good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, all in all, wasn't a fan of the drums. Just felt like it was being, I don't know, assaulted, I think is the word.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that people call this proggy, because I wouldn't say it's that proggy, because as we get into some of the later tracks, I think I would like it to be more proggy, in the sense I would like more things to happen and things to progress. Prog doesn't just mean this is a long song, you know?
Yeah, no, agreed.
And this one, like several others, I think they could have shaved a minute or two off and we wouldn't have lost anything.
Yeah. When I say progressive, I often, with this record in particular, I mean that there's a lot of parts to the individual elements. So, for example, the verses seem to have like 4 sort of individual elements to it before it then kicks into the chorus. So it's just a lot of movement, I suppose, is happening in any given point. Even though the song structure is quite traditional, there's just an awful lot of, like I say, movement happening within those elements.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't necessarily I definitely wouldn't say that's a trait of prog metal. I think it's definitely something with symphonic metal.
Yeah.
And one of the bands that listening this reminded me a bit of Nightwish. Who were obviously probably quite heavily inspired by Blind Guardian.
Yeah, I can see that.
I know what you mean about that. There's quite a lot going on. There's quite a lot of bits coming in and bits coming out, and quite long verses, long bridges. There's an intricacy to it. And that's part of what makes it sound interesting, but it's also what makes it a bit exhausting compared to when you think where it came from. Like, you know, it's not exactly Exciter by Judas Priest, which doesn't really have much to it at all.
No, completely.
But even like bands like Iron Maiden, there's a lot more going on than this. That's a band of 3 guitarists. But I think like I really enjoyed the guitars. I really enjoyed the main vocals, and I think part of it is just they get a bit buried in the mix.
Yeah,
like, not bad for a running track, but it's a lot for an opener.
No, definitely.
This is one for the fans, eh?
Yeah, I would agree. We'll move on then, because the second track, Battlefield, I think is a little bit more indicative of what Blind Guardian are about. I think it's a wonderfully overblown song. There's lots of faux sort of strings and synth they use to emphasize the melodies. And I think it works really well, actually. There's a more traditional metal riff in this, and I think it's a better fit for the band's music. It's still quite progressive in that there's a lot there, and it still favours that sort of higher pitched melody. But the songwriting feels more robust on this track. It's a little bit more tighter as the song length goes as well. We get another really great solo at 3 minutes 30. I enjoyed this a lot more in regards to Precious Jerusalem. I think the songwriting was a little bit stronger, and I think the use of synth really sort of emphasised the melodies that they were going for. And yeah, like I say, there was a bit more of a traditional metal sound to it as well, which I enjoyed.
Yeah, I think you're getting more of the speed metal coming in here.
That's it, yeah.
To an extent, it's a little bit quicker. Again, it's quite a lot going on. It's quite heavy going. I think the chorus is a couple of keys too high. And one of the things that I am not a big fan of is when I don't like a key change before the final chorus.
Okay.
Luckily, we don't get it in metal quite a lot.
Yeah.
But it's often done like it just smacks of 90s boy band pop. This one, it felt like every chorus had that key shift, and I think. There's certain bands where the singers are a little out of their range. Hansi's not out of his range. The whole thing just sounds a little bit too pitch shifted or something. Yeah. So that irritated me about this, but on the whole, it was all right. It was fine.
I thought it was definitely a better track than the previous one, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting. Like I was surprised by how off-put I was by Precious Jerusalem, because I remember that song and I remember it being pretty good.
Yeah.
But I think the reason it stuck in my head is because it repeats its own chorus so many times.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's the whole song.
Right.
Oh,
yeah.
All the bits I remembered were all the bits there were to remember. That's a problem.
I think as well, like stuff like this is when you're younger, when it's such an assault, it's kind of so there's something extremely enticing about that, especially if you're into heavy music. I think you kind of forgive an awful lot of the songwriting because you're just so like excited by the fact that something sounds so absolutely insane.
Totally.
Yeah, totally. I remember having a similar thing like that when I first reacted to Dragon Force, thinking like, oh my god, this is going to be the biggest band in the world. And then you come back to it and it's like, oh wait, they have one idea and they beat it to death.
I've seen them play live supporting Iron Maiden, and I think they've one idea and they beat it to death. Is probably fair, as well as it doesn't really seem like they can play their own songs.
Yeah.
Slow down.
Chill out, guys. Work on your songwriting. So
Well, I don't really want to do Dragon Force because I feel like it would just be mean. I'm just not really a fan. That's okay. Can't make everything.
I'm the same, to be honest with you. I feel like if anybody has real strong opinions about a certain record that they'd like us to cover, then maybe we can consider it for a future episode. But I just don't think it's the sort of thing that either of us are going to get along with, and it's not going to make for very interesting listening.
But I think there's definitely similarities, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely that speed metal thing that we've been talking about, I think, is quite prevalent in the old Dragon Force, and they do like that high-pitched, overblown chorus. There's definitely influences there. We'll move on then to track 3, which is Under the Ice. How do you feel about this one?
So I described this as the last of the 3-song battering ram that opens this album. Basically, I couldn't stop laughing at the chorus. I thought it was wonderfully silly. So, under the ice you will be free. Under the ice you will believe. And I was like, I just thought that was so. That's the only thing that stuck in my head.
Yeah.
I thought it was so funny and so silly. It was hard not to like.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing with power metal. I think you have to be in a certain mood and a certain frame of mind to really enjoy it, and it is daft and it is silly an awful lot of the time, and sometimes that is what you want. You want a bit of silly entertainment, and that's why it scratches that itch so well. And Blind Guardian certainly do that very well. For me, I wasn't too strong on this one. I didn't think the chorus was as strong as what's come before, even though it was quite a lot of fun, like you said, like lyrically.
I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying it's funny.
I liked that there was a big sort of silly, like, parody almost of an Eastern sound coming into the melodies on this one.
Yeah, there's almost like a bit of rock sitar.
Yeah,
and it's not the only track that happens in.
Yeah, it happens a few times actually. I did enjoy that actually, even though it is very sort of overblown. Again, a lot going on, but very few elements outside the chorus sort of get repeated, so it has a feeling of progression, but I think it's just because there's just so much happening in any sort of verse. But I enjoyed it.
Also, there's a couple of bits, like I like the little guitar lick before the chorus.
Yeah. It had a good flow, definitely. It moved in a nice way, actually, this one.
Yeah, and it's probably... It feels like things are getting a little bit more under control. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely.
Like I say, it is a bit like a 3-track battering ram at the opening of this album, but I think things are starting to mellow it a little bit.
Yeah,
probably for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's everything I need to say about that, to be honest with you. So we'll move on to track 4 then, which is Sadly Sings Destiny. I really
is this the character select music from Sonic Adventure?
It would certainly fit, wouldn't it? I mean, yeah. That's. I wonder if we could somehow weasel that in as extended listening. Bit of cop rock.
I think you need to put a few seconds of that, and then a few seconds of the Sonic Adventure character select music. Like, I mean, I'm in it in a good way. I suspect Jun Senoue is a Blind Guardian fan, and I think that in a lot of that, like the Sonic Adventure soundtracks, there's definitely a power and speed metal influence.
Oh, completely, completely.
Yes. So what did you think of this one?
I like this one. I think it's got a sort of really thrashy quality to this one, actually. In the music, in the verses in particular. I don't think the chorus is that strong. I thought it needed to be a little bit more OTT. I didn't quite come away with this one thinking, that will stick with me. I wasn't like humming the chorus where I have been for a lot of the tracks on here. I do like that there's a sort of sing-along quality to an awful lot of this. A little bit more soaring, but yeah, I can't. It's just a bit weird. It's all over the shop.
I think, it's more of a hard rocker.
Yeah,
I thought it was a welcome change of pace. I actually quite liked the chorus because I like the melodic Jun Senoue-esque guitars in the background.
Yeah,
it reminds me of two things, which is basically the Sonic Adventure 2 soundtrack, specifically the Tails tracks, and it also reminded me a lot of Mr. Big. You ever listen to Mr. Big? Yeah.
Oh, of course, I've got a Mr. Big best of.
Of course, you did, because you're probably a fan of like Spider-Man versus the Kingpin. Which,
absolutely. Yep, Swing Time's a great song. Absolutely.
Swing Time. So this reminded me of all this stuff, and I think that's why I liked it. It's definitely one of the weirder tracks in the album.
Yeah,
but I think. I just enjoyed it. Thought it was something a bit different.
It was a lot of fun, and again, the solo work after the first two choruses was really nice. Some serious guitar chops on this band, it's got to be said. But yeah, it was again. There's a lot going on, and it's difficult to sort of pass what you're listening to. Especially when we're coming in with this so fresh and it being such a new listen to me. I mean, there was some qualities of this I really liked. I did like it was quite thrashy in places, and I did like the soaring, overblown sing-along quality to the vocals. But just chorus didn't quite hit me in the same way.
One of the things about this album is that as you listen to it, it reminds you of other things. And
I
get distracted and go, I really want to listen to that track, the Prison Lane one from Sonic Adventure 2. That's a good tune. Or, you would listen to Battlefield or something, would remind me of something else as well. Or the next one, the Maiden and the Minstrel. And I was like, that's a bit like Nightwish. I could go listen to some Nightwish. No, Alan. stick to the Blind Guardian.
It is a little bit scattershot in its ideas. I think they've thrown everything at this and just gone with whatever stuck, you know. Speaking of the Maiden and the Minstrel Night, we should probably move on to that.
So the intro to this is very much something from Nightwish. A bit more chill, a bit more symphonic.
I wrote in my notes, big FL Studio default strings energy. I think they've got aspirations to do bigger things.
Yeah, it's like a budget Japanese indie game kind of soundtrack,
absolutely. Isn't it? Like you say, I think it's quite aspirational in that they obviously want to do bigger sounding stuff with orchestras and stuff like that. And Hansi did actually do a Blind Guardian orchestral record last year. With a proper, like orchestra. Haven't heard that. Don't know if that's really my thing, but he's obviously got that.
I haven't heard that, but it has crapped up Apple Music, because maybe you look for this album, you can't find it under Blind Guardian. I was like, trying to get into the album for the podcast. Like, oh, fuck's sake! It's because it's under Blind Guardian Twilight Orchestra. Which is not true. It's not true. That's one or two albums, but it's been the metadata is all screwed up. So if you're looking for this in Apple Music, it's under Blind Guardian Twilight Orchestra, not Blind Guardian. But all the other albums are under Blind Guardian. I don't know.
Bizarre.
Yeah, so that's Apple Music. You get used to it. They've finally broken out EPs and singles from the albums. So,
good stuff.
It's getting better.
Yep.
So we were listening to this in the car today on the way back from visiting the in-laws, and Jess said this song sounded like the soundtrack to an anime about knights. She said, you can imagine horseback riding, and the fields and the grass they always draw. She described it.
Big long sweeping grass. Yeah, no, I agree completely.
Yeah.
I think the songwriting shines quite brightly on this one. Actually, I thought the vocal melodies were really memorable. I think after the sort of faux orchestra moment at the start, things probably kick off around the 2-minute mark, and I think the additional instrumentation makes it sound a lot more complete, a little bit more fuller. The pacing of this track is a little bit more slower and a little easier to pass as well, so I enjoyed that element to it as well. And I really kind of like the fake out ending at the end, when like it feels like it's ended and then all the music comes back in all of a sudden. I was just like, oh, that's fun. I really enjoyed that.
I like the chorus as well. I think that the choral vocals are actually a much better fit for this kind of epic ballad compared to the regular tracks.
Yeah, agreed.
And part of what I find so sonically fatiguing about this album, especially the first two tracks, Precious Jerusalem and Battlefield, is that I find the vocal layering really just hard to take after a while.
Yeah.
And I just feel like I'm getting battered, but it actually works quite well here.
Yeah,
I think it works better as like a nice chorus, and you can imagine it being like a pub song in times gone by.
Yeah, completely.
And it picks up the pace a little bit around 2:30, still fairly subdued, and you can hear the Blind Guardian wailing guitar sound come through. So this is kind of like wow, 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 wow. Every song has to have that in it, which is quite fun. The last 30 seconds just come out of nowhere. I don't think they're necessary, but I do think they're quite fun.
Yeah, well, this is it, and I think that's isn't that a great summation of power metal?
Blind Guardian, I don't think they're that necessary, but they are quite fun.
Like you say, I think their style and their vibe they're going for definitely fits this sort of grandiose, slower paced track a lot better. Really enjoyed this one, and I think as well we should probably mention as well that if you're not into the vocal style, it's going to be a difficult thing to sort of get to grips with when you listen to Blind Guardian, because Hansi is obviously very keen on that. It's a stylistic choice that he's obviously really into. I'm sure it's because he's a big Queen fan and he loves that style, and it's fine, don't get me wrong, you do have to adjust for it. He's a great vocalist. I don't think he is covering up for the fact that he's not a great vocalist.
No, not at all.
It's just a shame that he uses it all the time, and it is something that permeates almost every record. And if you're not going to vibe with it,
permeates every record that you have listened to. This is the really interesting bit. Is it? There's a little bit of it in Nightfall and Middle Earth. But before we did this podcast, I cut into some of the old albums and picked a couple of select tracks.
Okay.
And early Blind Guardian albums are not like this, and this is why the drummer left, because he didn't like all the vocal layering and the symphonic shit.
Yeah.
And I think he's got a point. I think they're better with Hansi on his own.
Yeah,
I don't think having the whole thing choral vocals the whole way through works.
Okay,
because it seems like every vocal is double tracked. It doesn't need that. It would be much more effective for songs like this, where it's just a little bit of the chorus multi-track vocals. I think used sparingly, they'd be much more effective.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I completely agree with you, to be honest with you. As much as I am obviously more of a fan, and I like I say, I'm more familiar with the more recent 3 records, which are heavily, using that vocal style. I can see exactly why it would put people off, and I agree with what your sentiments there. We'll move on then, because I want to kind of get track 6 out of the way, because I didn't have a lot to say about it. Wait for an Answer is track 6. It takes about 2 minutes to find a nice groove, so you're waiting a while for it to sort of settle into its groove. And I think it's a bit lacking in melody, to be honest with you. I think the instrumentation is once again very high pitched, and I needed a bigger hook. I wasn't finding the hooks on this song, and it just sort of passed me by and didn't quite vibe with it.
Just for me, a bit too cheesy and ponderous. I looked up the lyrics and I wasn't quite sure what they meant, but I felt like this might not be correct, but I felt like it was being preached to by a Reddit atheist. It's just, start using your brain. It's like, what? God. It's like so a little bit too cheesy. I thought it was a good solo at the 4-minute mark and had that classic 80s metal sound coming through, but it was too little too late by that point.
No, agreed completely. It just didn't do an awful lot for me. So we will move on, because the next track did a lot for me. Track 7 is The Soul Forged. This is brilliant. This is excellent. Great lilting riff at the start. I really like that. Just loaded with riffs, this song, and it was really catchy, and the chorus was brilliant, and the solo was awesome during the bridge. There's just a real great drive throughout the entire song. It moves in such a great way. Lots going on still, and I think it's still going to be hard to pass if you're not really into the style, but I think this was the strongest of the assaulting songs, Flowed really well. Really enjoyed the chorus every time we returned to it. I loved the Soul Forge. I don't know what you feel about it, but really liked this one.
Oh, so you see when I heard that opening riff?
Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow.
That's it. That's the one I'm talking about.
It really
reminded
me of Iron Maiden's Prowler.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or that Judas Priest sounds like, oh yes, this is gonna be cool.
Yeah.
And then it kind of loses and gains steam. It's got that Celtic. It's got a bit of a folk metal feel to it and quite a lot of drive.
Yep,
so it's not quite full folk metal. It's not like Encephalum or something, but it's not
Yeah.
that far off. But
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, but I don't know. It felt like it wasn't quite as good. It felt like it never lived up to the big riff at the start. And I was expecting something with more of that rhythm to it, and I don't know. Again, perhaps a little bit too long, and I felt it hurt enough by 4 minutes.
Yeah.
The key change, it sounded like Hansi's throat was going to explode.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So he's really, really selling it.
Yeah.
But I think this is a fun track, but I don't know. I think I was so into the first 15 seconds.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair.
I was like, that I just...
Could we have more of that, please?
Yeah, I think I wanted more of that particularly tasty lick, and I wanted that to develop and be like. So if you listen to a song like Prowler, that's pretty much this is right there. You go. That's the riff. Here we go. We're going to hear that riff and some variants on that riff.
Yeah.
So I wanted to hear them work with that a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And that's probably not entirely fair, but it was just I don't know.
No,
I went from being incredibly excited to okay, this is where we're going. We're doing like folk metal. Okay.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I think as well.
But a good track.
Yeah. I think as well. I've got to mention actually the way I listened to this is I actually listened to it in 2 halves. So I listened to the first half, got a bit exhausted, took a break, come back to it later, sort of thing. So again, I'm sure that's indicative of something, but that maybe there's a little bit too much going on here. But also, I think having that break may have helped that track in particular have the emphasis that it did on my own taste. I think if I would have listened to this all in one big heap, I think that might have got lost in the mix a little bit. Whereas I think it's a highlight of the back half, to be honest with you. For me, it's a back half banger. So yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Maybe it is. So the next one's definitely not a banger, which is Age of False Innocence. I will not deny its false innocence. I will not the age of false innocence.
Yeah.
So what did you think of this?
Okay, so the notes I've got. So it's got a bit of a dramatic build to a crescendo around about the 1 minute mark, where the full instrumentation finally comes in. Again, we've got that sort of Eastern influence on the melodies and the lead guitar early on, sort of, like I say, sort of Eastern sound. I thought it was decent. It had some solid grooves, serviceable chorus, but not the record's strongest by any means. I don't think it's a bad song. I don't think it's a great song. Very middle of the road.
I think this one is actually a pretty good ballad. And so one of the things I didn't really like about this album was I didn't really like the drums. I found them quite repetitive throughout.
Okay. Yeah.
But I quite like the drums in this. The opening with the rolls coming in. And I actually think the album could use more bits like this.
Okay.
I think a bit more dynamism, a bit more progginess to carry some of the longer songs.
Yeah.
This one works because it accentuates the big and the loud bits versus the quieter bits.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the other tracks certainly do not do that, and they just pound their way through.
Okay.
But a bit more rock sitar.
Yeah.
3 minute mark.
That's definitely what I was calling on.
Again, another pretty good solo. I think it's probably what I think this needs was just a big fast tempo finish, a la Holy Wars at the 4 minute mark.
Yeah.
Rather than coming back to the main theme again.
Yeah.
I would have just preferred a minute of extreme noodling and we just cut it.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Then yet another 6 minute track.
Yeah.
And that's probably the proggiest thing about this album is that each of the tracks is about 2 minutes longer than they need to be.
Yeah, definitely agreed.
So that's that. I think it's an interesting change of pace. And again, this is the whole thing about you don't want to make too much into how the albums were structured and stuff. But, it's the kind of track you kind of need in the back half because otherwise this would be an energy sapper.
Yeah, no, completely, because there is just so much going on. Right, we'll move on to track 9 then, which is Punishment Divine. Now, I think this starts with a bit of a false flag, this song. It's got a really heavy riff right at the start, and I was like, okay, here we go. And yeah, it doesn't quite deliver on that. It's actually one of the weirdest songs on the record, actually. I think it's got a little bit too much going on, as per usual. Some really fast, thrashy riffs here and there, but it doesn't really settle on a style. And I think that's at the detriment of this song, to be honest with you. I quite like the chorus with the banished to the point of no return. I think that was very memorable, very bombastic. But yeah, it just didn't flow right for this one for me. I felt like it needed to find its style, find its vibe, and it never really got that. It was a little bit too scattershot for my taste.
So this was the first Blind Guardian song I ever heard.
There we go.
And it totally blew my mind. I think it was like, so I think this one is still delightfully over the top.
Yeah.
I think probably is the heaviest track in the album, but I hear where you're coming from, that the opening riff is probably heavier than the rest of it.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it's on the verge of driving itself over the cliff. The vocals and drums are absolutely thunderous. The guitar melodies kind of come and go. I think the choral vocals here again are a bit more complementary.
Yeah.
They're not quite at the front of the mix the way they are on some of the other tracks.
Yeah.
Really nice dueling solo that reminds me a bit of classic Maiden. And this one, to me, it feels like it builds to a crescendo. You got some tempo changes near the end, and I feel like it earns the high notes.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
But if every song was like this, you'd have an aneurysm. So,
oh, God, that's totally right.
And I think it's okay that it comes in where it does in the album. So I actually really like this one.
It's interesting.
I still really like it, yeah.
We're still at very sort of different angles of this, I think, and I like that we're approaching this from different ways, because I think it showcases, this is going to hit people differently. It's just it is. I think it's quite a Marmite-y record, to be honest with you. I could see me re-listening to this and really starting to find my groove with it and actually enjoying this record a little bit better. But I think on first play, and this being just raw emotion, I think it's a little bit too much, and it needs to focus its line of thought a little bit.
And that's part of the genre, right? It is a little bit too much. Like it being over the top is part of the point, because otherwise that's the power in power metal.
There we go.
Maybe it's being bullshit, but I think so. We came back to, if we take ourselves back to 2001, and I'm hunched in front of Kazaa Lite again in my PC running Windows Millennium Edition. This was the first track I listened to, and Precious Jerusalem is probably in the next 2 or 3. And I think the other one was definitely Nightfall. Right?
Yeah.
I think because of the tracks I listened to, that's why I never got into Blind Guardian.
Yeah.
Because I listened to Punishment Divine and thought, this is a really good track.
Yeah.
And then I probably listened to Precious Jerusalem and thought, oh dear, this isn't that good. And I listened to Nightfall and was like, this isn't that great either. And I felt like this was probably the only track I needed to listen to.
Yeah.
And if this was, so I guess for me, they were a little bit of a one-hit wonder, but that one hit was Punishment Divine, and I think that's fair enough. But I could totally understand how, if you listen to the entire rest of the album first, you might be like, "Oh my god!" But yeah, really, really interesting, and I think it this is what was really interesting about the time whenever we got into music, and people did do more mixtapes and mix CDs, and even had so one of the songs I was reminded of was listening to this was, did you ever hear the song Vigilante by Magnum?
I don't, I'm afraid. I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay, right. So it's this really cheesy kind of hard rock / power metal track. It was one of those things that appeared in either Kerrang TV or Scuzz on Sky back in the day.
Okay.
And that was how we got into a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, completely.
There's bands I got into because you just hear a random track.
Yeah. Absolutely. I can think of lots of bands, in fact, on Kerrang in particular, that I got into. I think Mad Capsule Markets, I would have been exposed to that on Kerrang TV for the first time.
Tribe?
Absolutely, Tribe. Yeah, absolutely.
And so there's a lot of bands like that had, the way in which you listen to the band and the singles you choose and the albums you choose influences things so much. Like when you think about like the Tool stuff you listen to versus the way I got into them, all these things plant little seeds. It's really hard to get around. Like,
your preconceptions are always going to completely.
Yeah, imagine if your first Metallica album was like, if one person listened to Kill 'Em All and the other person listened to Saint Anger, like, what the hell?
Yeah. Well, this is it.
It's a bit like whenever I did you ever read the feature I did for 5 out of 10 where I went to Summer of Sonic, and I was
I did
talking to and I was talking, of course you did, that was Friendship Test, you passed.
There you go.
But I was talking to these kids about, what was your favorite Sonic game? And they're like, Sonic Heroes. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Well, that's the first one. That was the first one I played. I was like, what? What do you mean? What do you mean? Sonic Heroes?
To think that another generation,
that's history's worst crime.
Yeah, completely.
But yeah, like so much of the tastes we like, and even the parts of the bands we like, are based on what we listened to first, regardless of whether they were any good or not. Like the first Metallica album I got into was S&M.
I'm trying to
because my friend burned me a CD of S&M, and I was like, that was pretty good.
My first was Garage Inc., I think, which is a really weird way to come into it, but because it's all covers. Absolutely. But I remember my good friend Catbird playing me the cover of
Whiskey in the Jar?
No, the really sweary Anti-Nowhere League track, So What? And just thinking that was the funniest thing in the world, and I was like, I need everything apart from this. And
then I bought Reload.
Well, I mean, I think the first proper Metallica album I would have heard was Saint Anger, unfortunately, because that was I was getting into heavy music at the start of the 2000s, and that was the first new Metallica record. So, not a great first impression, unfortunately.
One of the first live gigs I ever saw was Metallica, and they were supported by Linkin Park and The Darkness.
Wow, that is a bonkers lineup.
Yeah. like in Linkin Park, got bottled, which probably wasn't very fair. But, you know, it was
wow. Okay.
Irish Metallica fans.
Oh.
So what are you gonna do? But yeah, that was the Saint Anger tour.
Yeah. Trad metal versus new metal. God, yeah, that's really weird.
So yeah, all I would say is one day we'll cover a Metallica album, and I would very much like to cover Saint Anger because I think we'd have a very interesting time talking about that.
Well, I think it's bizarre because it comes at such a formative time for a lot of people getting into heavy music, and at the same time, it's so not indicative of what Metallica are that I think, we will have a lot to say about it. We should stop putting off talking about the last song on this album. Because
we were listening to this in the car earlier today, and I said to Jess, the last track in this album's 14 minutes, and all she said was, "Oh God!" And then we didn't actually get the whole way through it before we got home.
You've just finished listening to this, haven't you?
Yeah, look, I wanted a prog track, but I'm not sure I wanted a 14-minute one.
Yeah.
When they unbring unite the end is near, you better be prepared. The darkness shall be over now, there's nothing more to fear. Come join in us singing and dance with us.
This is the proggiest thing on here. I don't think there's an awful lot of melodies and choruses and things that actually get returned to on this track. It is 14 minutes solid of continuously evolving and changing music, and it's all in that Blind Guardian style with the really heavily, overlaid vocals and all the bombastic synth, and it's just too much. There's an awful lot of really interesting stuff going on here, and it's all played really well, but it's just so long that a really good hook or chorus never get to happen. It's super indulgent. It doesn't service the song. I don't think it's a bad song, but it's a difficult song to love.
There's some interesting bits in here. I think the opening lick of Precious Jerusalem actually comes in about the 1:30 mark, which caught my ear.
Oh, really?
Okay. And there's some things like the dueling keyboard and guitars are very Dream Theater.
Yep.
I'd say quite heavily Dream Theater inspired. At the halfway mark, it really sounds like Queen. Like, it's not quite Bohemian Rhapsody levels of good, but it's very interesting musical layering. Apparently, this is based in the Iliad. I guess that explains the length.
Yep.
They've got a lot to cover.
Yeah.
At one point, 10 minutes in, there is a big riff. And I thought, now we're getting somewhere. And then it turns into Riverdance.
Yeah. Yes, I know exactly what you're on about. It's just so unruly, this song. It's just like, what do you want to be?
You can't do a 14-minute power metal track. You can't do prog power metal because power metal doesn't have any dynamics.
Yeah.
Because power metal is just and whenever you have really, really long tracks, you need to have drum solos and quiet bits and louder bits and changes. It can't just be full on balls to the walls the whole time.
Yep.
Can't you just? I don't know. I just find it exhausting.
Yeah.
Now, as I usually do, I had a bit of a look around. The old top10s.com. People say this is the best one. They say that this is there's no song more epic than this.
I would.
A masterpiece should be every top 10 power metal song. Somebody here's a good one. Somebody says it has so many epic parts that you don't know which one is the best. I think that's halfway right. I'd say there's so many epic parts you don't know which is which.
Yeah,
they say it's like too many songs in just one.
It is too many songs in just one, and I don't think that's a positive. I think that's a negative, unfortunately. A bizarre track and a weird album closer. That doesn't really fit the vibe of the rest of the record. I suppose, in a weird way, it does, in that it's an album full of too much stuff, all battling for supremacy. But this all happens in one song, and my God, is it exhausting.
Disappointed, though.
Yeah,
I'm disappointed because this was, can you believe it, this was the single of this album.
No way. Oh, my God.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Jesus.
That was the only single they released.
Wow.
I don't think they released it, to get radio play.
No, they definitely didn't. No. Oh my God, that's too much. Yeah. So, final thoughts on this record. Then I think I was expecting something else, and I didn't quite get it. It was a lot wilder and faster than the more recent Blind Guardian efforts. Sometimes a little too unruly. I think it's a lot of fun and overblown, like all good power metal really should be. But it's just it's a little bit too intense and a little bit too wild, and I think it needs to restrain its focus a little bit and just really sort of focus what it's trying to do. And an awful lot of these songs do not feel focused. They're just a little bit too scattershot for my liking. I didn't dislike it, but I didn't like it at the same time. It was very much it felt proto Blind Guardian to me, which is bizarre because it's so late in their career.
Because it's very much not. It's very much transitional. Blind Guardian. I was super disappointed by this one. Yeah. I was really looking forward to just having a fun time.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the same vibe.
I was expecting myself to really enjoy this, and then I was like, oh. And then, but I think if we went back a couple of albums, we'd be having a very different conversation.
Yeah.
I think even if we went back to Nightfall and Middle-earth, we'd have a very different conversation.
Yep.
I think if we went forward a couple of albums to the newer ones, I think we'd be having a very different conversation.
Even if we just went to the next record.
Demons and Wizards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
a twist in the myth
Demons
is
and Wizards,
really, really
having
good.
a delightful time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really, really disappointed, and I'm surprised that I'm disappointed.
Yeah, no, a bit of a shame, that one, unfortunately.
A bit of a shame.
Yeah, I'm going to guess your favourite song, just based on pure nostalgia, would be Punishment Divine.
It has to be, yeah.
Yeah. If it wasn't that, I would have said your favourite would have been The Maiden and the Minstrel Knight. That seemed to come off really quite strong with you.
I enjoyed that one as well, but I think it's got to be Punishment Divine for me.
And I think I've made mine.
I think it's a good. Yeah, yours is obviously the Soul Forest.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really.
Which I think is probably the correct answer for what's the best track in the album, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's my favorite. Yeah. So yeah, that was that then.
Yeah,
Send your Blind Guardian hate mail to Cast Iron Show.
I don't think we've been unnecessarily harsh here.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I think for further listening, I would personally recommend, for a different Blind Guardian record, I would recommend the follow-up album, which is A Twist in the Myth. I think that is considerably more focused. The songs are a lot more memorable, and they're not as so overwrought. You know, they don't have as many parts to them. There are a lot more better structures. But is further listening from different artists, I have picked Primo Victoria by Sabaton as one of my favourites. Again, very similar in style in that it's big, overwrought, stupid power metal with concepts. Sabaton's concepts is always warfare, instead of, fantasy things. So there's a little bit difference there. And the vocals are not as heavily layered, and they're a little bit more punchier, a little bit more from the gut almost. They're big sort of anthemic songs, and I think that fits the bill quite nicely. And then for something a bit different, I've chosen a folk metal release, because it's about the closest I could find from my personal collection that's a little bit more in the style. I've chosen Natfood by Fintroll. I love this record. It's very, very silly, very, very stupid, very overblown, lots of sort of string elements and synths and things emphasizing the melodies that they go for, but vocally it's quite different. It's all screamed as opposed to the clean song album that we've just heard. Something a little bit different for you, but also just as overblown.
I've just been scribbling down your further listening choices because I'm determined to put them into the show notes for once.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
I have been listening to the further listening. I was listening to Tesseract's. Which one was it you recommended?
Oh, I recommended Polaris, didn't I? Yes.
Yeah, I've been listening to that. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I still think Altered State's a better record, but I was listening to it.
Mm.
Okay, so I've had a good think about this, and I had sort of a short list of 4.
Okay, wow.
But
okay.
One I'm not going to earnestly recommend. I'm just going to put it there if I couldn't think of anything better. So my first recommendation is an album by Symphony X, which is called Iconoclast.
Okay.
So Symphony X are more prog metal with a little bit of power metal in it.
Okay.
And Iconoclast is, I think, a better way to do this proggy style of power metal.
Right, that makes sense.
So it's like the first track's 10 minutes. So it's not for the faint of heart, but I think it's really good. It's got some speed metal-y bits, really talented band. There's a lot to dive into there. And they've got pretty much all their most recent 4 albums are all very good, but I've picked Iconoclast for that. So the other one is a bit of curveball. So my second recommendation is by Trivium, and is the album Silence in the Snow. So
justify it for me.
Okay, so Trivium are a band that have this problem where every album they release sounds like a different band. It's not them. Their first album sounds like them. Then they did an album that sounds way too much like Metallica, to the point of like it sounds like a parody record. Then they kind of find themselves, and then you go through various different bits. They've got an album that sounds too much like Disturbed. Silence in the Snow is their album that's got a lot of power metal influences, and I think it's a lot of fun.
Okay.
There's one particular track that's very power metal called "Blind Leading the Blind," which has a hilarious music video for it. I just think it's a fun record. I think it's interesting to take a genre like power metal and have it put through the lens of a more modern metal band.
Okay, I think I really want to listen to that. I've been really enjoying what Matt Heafy's been up to recently. He seems to be just really exciting and interesting to watch on Twitch. He likes to cover stuff and just do really daft things. He's just really involved with metal. All his recommendations are always really solid. He just seems to be a really cool guy. And yeah, I think I want to give that a go. He recently cropped up doing a solo on the new Bleed From Within track, which I would highly, highly recommend if you haven't heard that. Yeah.
I mean, the stealth recommendation is the new Trivium album, What the Dead Men Say, which is like probably my favourite album of the year so far. Having said that, there's a new Caligula Source out in a fortnight. That is unlikely to remain my top one, but it's really, really good.
And we were talking as well before this, weren't we? I recommended you Video Nasties. I think their Dominion album is absolutely fantastic. One of my favourites of the year so far. Really good bit of sort of, well, they call it black and roll, but it's sort of mellow death mixed with hardcore. Really good stuff.
It's fun. So my third and final recommendation is actually a power metal album.
Okay.
It's the Black Halo by Camelot.
Yep.
So Camelot are an American power metal band. I think they're
Camelot with a K, isn't it?
Camelot with a K.
That's the one.
Yeah. Because Ks make things more metal. Like Mortal Kombat. So this is, I guess you could call it a more traditional power metal thing, but they're doing a lot of stuff that Blind Guardian do, like a little bit of vocal layering.
Yep.
They've got the symphonic bits in there.
Yep.
I think it's executed here much better than A Night at the Opera. There's a kind of a side recommendation to this, which is Camelot have quite a lot of albums. The Black Halo is probably the best way to get into them.
Yep.
They have an album called Poetry for the Poisoned, and the first track on it is called The Great Pandemonium.
Right.
It is not the best song they've ever done, but is one of the best guitar solos I've ever heard.
Okay.
Like, it's
fair enough.
You know, one of those
justifies its existence.
And you get to the end of it, you think, ooh, and then you immediately rewind and listen to it again. It's one of those. So that's why that track gets a special recommendation, because I'll probably never talk about Camelot again in this podcast.
Never say never. Cool. I think that wraps this up in a nice little package. Thank you, as always, very much for listening. I have been Lewis Clark. You can find me on Twitter at Sonic Yoda. Alan Williamson, you don't really use social media.
Can't find me anywhere. I pretty much use Twitter to like things that Lewis has posted.
There you go. If you do want to find,
you can find me in Goodreads. You can find me in Goodreads. I post on my book. All my book likes.
You do some writing, obviously Split Screen as well.
Yes, I've been trying to write again at Split Screen. One of the great things about being in the quarantine zone is that I have 3 hours of my life back from commuting every day. So that's why we're getting back into cast iron. As I've heard various things about people listening to more podcasts versus less, but I think it's probably broadly the same.
Yep, I think it really helps to have something
opportunity for us
to distract yourself during lockdown. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's good for us to keep back in touch and checking on each other as well, and make sure that we haven't, lost our minds listening to too much Blind Guardian.
Mm-hmm. Lovely stuff. I'm just going to do a quick plug as well for Cranston, my band. I haven't spoken to about on Cast Iron yet, but I would highly recommend going to cranstonpunk.bandcamp.com and listening to some nice blackened hardcore if you'd like something a bit heavy. I'm working on a new EP. Hopefully they have that up either summer, and I've got a really crazy guest appearance on it already, and I'm really excited to everybody to hate this new record because of it.
Is it Matt Heafy?
No, it's not Matt Heafy, unfortunately. But yeah. So yeah, thank you very much for listening as always. We'll be back hopefully next month with another new record. It'll be over Alan's pick this time, so have a little look through the old spreadsheet and see what we got.
I'm going to do a final plug as well, which is also for Lewis's band Cranston. So yeah, you should go and download it. It's very good.
Thank you very much. Okay, guys.
I was not paid to say that.
Good stuff. All right. Thank you very much for listening as always. We will catch you next time.
Bye.